Hi everybody, thanks for stopping by my channel. I am Kelsey and I am essentially booked on all platforms, both on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And today I'm going to talk about my April reading and my wrap-ups. April was an extremely great reading month for me. I'm surprised because we're in the midst of soccer season, which this is kind of the month that gets very busy for us. My husband coaches our high school girls team and every night he has practice from like 5:30 to 8, and I have an almost 3-year-old. And so it's just been a little different of a season for me, right? I am a lot more exhausted than I've been this year because my child has been fighting bedtime. So my peak reading time used to be 8 to 10:30, and now my son is going to bed later. So I'm really only getting like 9 to 10 as my reading time for just quiet me time. This month I read a ton of books in multiple formats. So I listened and read, and I think that is one of the reasons why I credit how well I did this month. The other thing is I did go on a girls trip to Scottsdale this month and was really only able to read one book, but it was a great book and it was just a really well-needed rest and relaxation trip. It's a girls trip that I go on with my mom's side of the family and it's just super relaxing. We just hang out at the pool all week, relax. Sometimes we go hiking. This year we just stayed and it was so great. So I read 12 books this month. None of them were lower than a 3-star rating, and I'm really happy with this month. I read a ton of physical books from my shelves, which is very exciting for me. If you've been following along, you know one of my goals is to kind of whittle down my unread shelf, specifically book of the months. And I read a lot of book of the months this month. What helped was it was the Magical Readathon and Realmathon, which were two different readathons. Realmathon I didn't really plan for, I just kind of used that for fun, but Magical Readathon I actually made a TBR and I stuck with it. And so that was really fun. My friend Gwen also kind of did a book of the month challenge, and so she picked a few people in that group, picked some books. I buddy read a book with my friend Layna, and then Gwen recommended a book to me that ended up being 5 stars. So it's just been a really great month for reading and I'm very excited about it. I'm gonna start going from 3 stars to 5 stars. We'll end the video on that 5-star feeling, and yes. I rated 5 books 3 stars. I'm going to talk about the 2 books I do not have physical copies of right now. One was a library book, one is an art, which I have on my Kindle, but I don't know where my Kindle is because my toddler hid it from me. The very first book was The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. I loved The Appeal by Janice Hallett, and she's a British mystery author. She writes really cleverly, like in mixed format. So The Appeal was a whole bunch of emails and it was this case file presented to some attorneys to figure out what happened. This one, The Twyford Code, is about this main character, I think his name is Steve, and he found this book as a child and brought it to class and was talking about it, and the teacher read it and just kind of freaked out about it. It was really weird. She drove them off to this place to go find the author of this book and then disappeared. All the kids from this class perceived it differently. The main character ends up in jail, and then you kind of are fast forwarded to the present time. And he just gotten out of jail. He's trying to re-enter society, but also this event in his life just can't escape him. The book is written again in a clever format. The book is him transcribing essentially what happened into an iPhone, and then you're reading the transcriptions. And as you all know, voice to text isn't the most accurate. And so the author kept that to be realistic. And it was really clever, but the whole crux of the mystery is a puzzle. I just really lost a lot of what was going on because I was so hung up on the transcription. And like, for example, the statement must have, I must have. In audio, it's mustard. That's just how it picked it up. And so that would be in the writing, and it was just hard for me. And then ultimately the resolution of the book comes down to a lot of those word games and transcription errors. And it just, maybe I wasn't smart enough. It was very clever, but it was just very distracting for me. And then the mystery itself, how it unraveled, I was like, this is just really far-fetched for what it is. It was a 3-star read. I see the value. I see why people love it, but I wasn't smart enough for it, I think, is the crux of that. And I read Coronation Year by Jennifer Robson. And this was the author who wrote The Gown, which was a historical fiction. A historical fiction not related to war. So this is about the year that the queen is coronated? Sure. This hotel is right on the street of the procession. The proprietress of this hotel is really hoping this will save her failing hotel. And there's a mystery behind it. Someone is kind of sabotaging the hotel. Just really well done, but it just kind of drug in places. And so that's why I gave it a 3-star. I read 9 Perfect Strangers with my friend Layna. This is my very first Leanne Moriarty. Layna talked about this in her wrap up too. it was just okay. It is a really good character study. You look really into, I think, 9 people's lives as they are at this retreat. So they're at this retreat. It's a health and wellness retreat. All of them are here for certain reasons. It was great. I liked the character study. I like people behaving badly. It was an enjoyable read, but the plot twist was just too much for me. It was stupid. Bizarre is a better word, I think. It just didn't work for me and it made me mad. It was just fine. It wasn't anything to write home about. Like, I don't remember much about it because I read this at the beginning of the month, so I think that says something. Okay, and then the last 2 3-star reads I read were Spinning Silver, which is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, Jewish and Russian folklore. Eastern European folklore. I loved Uprooted by this author. I did not love this one as much. It was just slow, and then the point of views would change and you wouldn't know who was speaking. Like, it didn't clearly label who was the new point of view at the time. One thing that was cool about this, none of the women are like conventionally beautiful. There was an unbelievable romance. I wanted more information on the Tsar and Tsarina. There's just a lot about this that I thought could have been done better, and I think a lot of people love it, and I just didn't. It didn't do it for me. I read The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reed, and this is really good. I think I gave it 3 stars because it drug in places, so the pacing was a little off, but the research and the commentary on anti-Semitism through this fictional world is really good. It was just a really great, if you want a standalone fantasy, I would definitely recommend this. So this unforgettable debut is inspired by Hungarian history and Jewish mythology, follows a young pagan woman with hidden powers and a one-eyed captain of the woodsmen as they form an unlikely alliance to thwart a tyranny. So there's like court intrigue in this. There's adventure parts where they're going into the woods to find like a wild animal and kill it. Lots of court politics. For a standalone fantasy, this did a lot of work in one book and it was all easy to follow. There is a glossary in the back. If you don't know that, like I didn't until 2/3 in, that changes me. That changed the reading for me a little bit once I figured that out, because then I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's what this word means, versus trying to figure it out. So there is a glossary in the back, but 3 stars. It was a great standalone fantasy. All right, so for my 4-star reads, I read 4 books that I rated 4 stars. The only one I don't have a physical copy of is A Rogue's Rule for Seduction by Eva Leigh. She's a historical romance author. I have been sent all 3 books in this series from Avon, so thank you, Avon, for those. I have 2 physically, one as an e-galley, and this is really about 2 families that are connected because the sons are all kind of playboys, so to say, and they need to get their act together or they lose their inheritance. And so they all marry. This one follows Dom and Willa. Dom had jilted Willa at the author in a prior book, and they end up at a party on an island off of Scotland. Forced proximity, enemies to lovers, second chance romance tropes, all the things I love. It was really good, really steamy for a historical author, for historical romance. Eva Leigh does write extremely, I don't know if it's Eva Leigh or if it's Eva Leigh. I don't know. She does write extremely steamy historical romances. So if you love historical romance, definitely recommend her. This series is a lot of fun. I think it's Last Chance Scoundrels. I could be making that up, but anyways, I'll put the graphic right here. I have the second in the series that I haven't read yet, but it's on my nightstand, so I'm hoping to get to that shortly. The good thing about historical romances is you can read them out of order and you don't lose really much. There's not really spoilers per se. That was the only one I don't have. And then I read When We Were Bright and Beautiful in multiple formats. This is a legal, I wouldn't say thriller. It is definitely literary, but this follows a family whose son is arrested for rape. It gave me fictional Brock Turner vibes, and it's told from the perspective of the sister who is not biologically related to them. It gave me, I think, is it When We Were Bright and That's When We Were Bright and Beautiful. All the Ugly and Wonderful Things is by Bryn Greenwood, I think. It gave me those vibes. As far as, if you know that book, know that the triggers are very similar, okay? I loved that book too, but rich people behaving badly. This had a legal component to it, so I loved the courtroom aspects. I just really thought this was really well done, and it was not really talked about a lot, I think, when it came out. So if you like legal thrillers, if you like books that are procedural, if you did love he must say When We Were Bright and Beautiful, All the Ugly and Wonderful Things, I would definitely recommend this. And then The House is on Fire is about a fire in Richmond, Virginia at a playhouse in 1812. It's told from the perspective of 4 different characters. Some are free, some are black, some are slaves. The catalyst is that this packed playhouse catches on fire, and it starts because of negligence on behalf of the play company. And a lot of people died. Men are not portrayed kindly in this book because they escaped and left the women behind. A lot of women were left to fend for themselves. At one point, the play company tries to blame it on a riot of slaves. Lots of triggers, really well done. I just really, really enjoyed this book. So definitely recommend if you're looking for historical fiction that's not set in World War II. That's the thing. I'm all about it right now, but this was just really compelling, really well written. You couldn't help but root for the characters. I cried. This is the book I read in Arizona, and I'm like sitting on my raft floating and like trying to keep my tears in. So it was so good. The House is on Fire, Rachel Bean. Okay, and then the final 4-star read is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I love quiet, character-driven novels. That's just my thing. This is an exploration of a character who just lost her mom, who she was extremely close with. As she navigates that grief, she starts dating again, all while trying to write a novel. And just some of the language in this book was so beautiful, and I just wanted to sit in the writing. I really loved it. 4 stars. I didn't give it 5 stars because there were some parts that just didn't flow for me. So while the writing was beautiful, there were just some parts of it that I did not like. Sometimes I struggled with connecting with some of the love interests in this book. So just more nitpicky things, but 4-star read. I do think I'll be thinking about this one for a while. Who knows, it could bump up to a 5-star. Sometimes that happens to me with books, but for now, 4 stars, Writers and Lovers. I had 3 5-star reads this month, which is really good for me. So the first is The Stranger in the Woods. I did this during my first ever hosted reading sprints on a Monday morning. Read it at the beginning of the sprints, finished it by the end. My sprints got taken down because I used music in my live feed. Whoops. But anyways, this is about the extraordinary story of the last true hermit. This main character, this man, it's true, kind of went off the grid in like, I think the 80s and wasn't found until 2013, I believe. Really for no reason. Like, he wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He was just over the world, was very introverted. He might be on the spectrum, but that's just not known. To survive, he stole from homes in this Maine area, Maine, the state. That's ultimately what put him behind bars. He really tried to not be harmful or hurtful to people, but he did steal to survive. And it's just a really interesting book. It's not very long. I was just riveted by it, and it was very compelling nonfiction, so definitely recommend this. This is an extremely backlist book of the month, 2017, but I got it off my shelf, and it was one that I picked because it was short to get it off my shelf, and it ended up being a 5-star read. So yay, past Kelsey for picking a good one. And then my book club that I'm in for it's a group of ladies from my church. We read These Precious Days by Ann Patchett. This is the very first Ann Patchett I've ever read. She owns Parnassus Bookstore in Nashville. And this is a series of essays that kind of take place over the pandemic. It's about just her life, her dear friends. There was a lot of ties to knowing pilots and aviation in her life. My brother's a pilot, and so just some of this stuff hit very close to home for personal experiences. She also writes a lot about Tom Hanks' personal assistant, Suki, who becomes one of Anne's best friends. And if you know Ann Patchett and Tom Hanks narrates her audiobooks a lot. So that was just a really cool dynamic, but this is just a really beautiful book of essays. I actually want to buy it to own it for my shelf. For Indie Bookstore Day, I did buy The Dutch House because my book club is also reading that this month, and so I'm excited to read that, but this was just phenomenal. I loved it so much. And then finally, I finished Ask Again Yes at the 9th hour last night. The 11th hour. This is a book that follows 2 families over 40 years, and one really tragic event ties them together in a way that you don't want anybody to be tied together. And then 2 of the children fall in love, and so the ramifications of that. The audiobook of this is excellent because the characters and the families have Irish ties, and so there's like an Irish accent throughout the audiobook. A really great look at mental illness, alcoholism, and tragedy. So there are triggers to this. I could not put it down. I was totally riveted. Easy 5-star, will go on my forever shelf. And she has a new book coming out in May that I hope to read this month if I'm honest, but who knows? 3 5-stars is so good for me. I got 7 book of the month books off my shelf this month, which is really, really good. I need to count. I have unhauled a few book of the months too. I need to do a book of the month stat video, which I think I will do later this month, but 7 books off my book of the month shelf, read out of 12 is really good. Just such an excellent month for me. Thanks for sticking around and watching this video. I so appreciate you. If you've read any of those, I'd love to hear what your thoughts were. And until the next video, see you later.